What if the digital world you're reliving in right now wasn't born in the 20th century, but a full century earlier? What if the first programmer in history, Ada Lovelace, had lived long enough to see her revolutionary ideas actually built? Imagine opening your laptop today knowing that the foundations of its logic were created not in Silicon Valley, but in Victorian England. Imagine a world where steam engines powered not just factories and trains, but information itself. Stay with me, because this alternate timeline doesn't just rewrite history, it rewires the entire evolution of technology. Before we step into that world, let's meet the woman who made this possibility even imaginable. Born in 1815, Ada Lovelace was the daughter of the poet Lord Byron, but her mind belonged to mathematics. She saw Charles Babbage's analytical engine, not as a mechanical calculator, but as something far more profound, a machine capable of processing symbols, patterns, and even music. She wrote the first algorithm and became the world's first computer programmer long before anyone knew what a programmer was. But in our timeline, Ada died at just 36, and her ideas remained locked in paper, years ahead of their time. But what if history shifted just slightly? What if Ada survived, continued her work, and the analytical engine was completed under her guidance? What happens when a genius like Ada, already imagining software before hardware existed, suddenly has a lifetime to build an entirely new world? The year is 1855. Britain is at the peak of the Industrial Revolution. Steam powers factories, ships, and cities. But now, thanks to Ada's extended life and relentless drive, another kind of engine is rising, a machine that can think in numbers, loops, and logic. Engineers gather around the first fully functional analytical engine, a towering creation of brass gears and polished steel. It hums with mechanical precision, turning symbols into answers, instructions into processes. And at its core is Ada, feeding it not just commands, but concepts. She tests algorithms, refines them, and writes new ones, building the world's first software library. News spreads across Europe and the United States. Suddenly, the idea of programmable machines becomes more than a theory. Banks want them to speed up calculations. Universities dream of using them for astronomical predictions. The US government becomes interested in using them for census data and logistics. The world begins accelerating toward the information age long before electricity becomes common. And this is where the timeline truly shifts. Young inventors in America grow up inspired by Ada's work. Instead of waiting for electricity to change technology, mechanical computing starts taking root. Steam-powered data engines appear in major cities. These early computers are loud, massive, and slow by modern standards, but their existence plants a seed of possibility. The belief that machines can think becomes normal a century early. If you're enjoying how this alternate history is unfolding, make sure you subscribe, because this kind of deep storytelling is just getting started. And now, let's push further into this world, because the consequences are only beginning. As Ada's reputation rises, she becomes a global figure. Unlike in our timeline, where her work was forgotten for decades, here she becomes the face of a new technological revolution. She partners with industrialists, mathematicians, and young American engineers who travel across the Atlantic just to study under her. Theories expand from numbers to logic, from logic to language, and from language to creativity. Slowly, the world realizes that machines could one day analyze patterns, make predictions, and solve problems once thought humanoid. By the 1870s, the United States adopts a network of mechanical computing centers, each connected through telegraph lines. These centers help manage railroads, coastal shipping routes, financial markets, and weather mapping. America's growth accelerates dramatically because decisions that once took weeks can now be processed in hours. Inventors like Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, and Nikola Tesla grow up in a world where programmable machines already exist, shaping their ideas in ways our timeline never saw. And at the center of it all is Ada Lovelace, older now, but still guiding the trajectory of human progress. Her writings become foundational texts. Students treat her notes the way modern programmers treat documentation. And because she lived longer, she also mentors a generation of innovators who will carry her work far beyond her lifetime. If Ada's early computer ideas had taken root like this, the world wouldn't just have reached the computer age sooner. Humanity's entire relationship with information, creativity, and even intelligence would have changed. By the time the 1880s arrived, the world has split into two kinds of nations, those investing in mechanical computing and those falling behind. And the United States, inspired by Ada Lovelace's ideas and powered by its growing industrial strength, becomes the center of this new era of information. In this alternate world, American cities don't just expand outward with factories and railroads, they grow upward with towering data houses, each filled with rows of humming analytical engines. Workers trained in algorithmic logic, some barely out of college, operate these machines with the same confidence that clerks once handled paper ledgers. And all of this traces back to one person, Ada Lovelace. Her continued presence reshapes the culture around innovation. She spends her later years traveling between London, Boston, and New York, teaching, speaking, and challenging young inventors to think of machines not as tools, but as collaborators. While the rest of the world uses machines to calculate, Ada teaches Americans to use machines to create. Music composition engines, mechanical pattern analyzers, and early prediction models become mainstream ideas decades before our actual timeline ever imagined them. This shift changes American education as well. By the end of the 19th century, several universities have entire departments dedicated to computational sciences. Students learn how to design gears for faster processing, how to write symbolic instructions for pattern recognition, and how to connect engines through telegraph networks to share results. The word computer enters common speech not as a person who calculates, but as a machine that extends human thought. But progress doesn't come quietly. As mechanical computing grows, industries change. Jobs evolve. New economic and political tensions emerge. Some factory workers fear these new calculating machines will replace them. Business owners worry about the cost of upgrading to these complex engines. Traditional scientists argue that no machine steam-powered or not should be allowed to make predictions about society or warfare. And yet, despite all objections, the march of progress continues, driven largely by the undeniable success of Ada's systems. By the early 1900s, the entire world is watching the United States experiment with something radical: automated decision-making. Railroads begin using prediction engines to prevent collisions. Hospitals use medical data engines to detect patterns in patient symptoms. Early stock exchanges use fast mechanical processors to analyze pricing trends. These machines are primitive compared to modern computers, but for the people of this timeline, they are nothing short of miraculous. And then comes the event that changes everything: the rise of early artificial intelligence. Around 1910, a group of Ada's intellectual descendants, engineers who grew up studying her lectures and writings, create a machine capable of learning from previous inputs. It cannot think like a human, but it can adjust its operations, refine predictions, and optimize mechanical processes. Newspapers call it Lovelace logic, a tribute to the woman who first imagined machines that could go beyond calculation. With this breakthrough, the United States enters a golden age of innovation. Factories become more efficient, farms use prediction engines to manage harvests, and military strategists experiment with automated planning tools. When global tensions begin rising, America has something no other nation does: computational foresight. World War I unfolds in a dramatically different way. Instead of relying solely on generals and field reports, the U.S. and its allies use linked analytical engines to predict enemy troop movements, calculate supply needs, and analyze battlefield risks with mechanical precision. The war ends much sooner, with fewer casualties, and the world takes note. Nations everywhere begin investing heavily in computing, pushing the global race for innovation into overdrive. But even as the world rushes toward the future, Ada's influence remains unmistakable. She passes away in the early 20th century, honored worldwide as the architect of computational thought. Her funeral is attended by scientists, engineers, and world leaders who recognize that her ideas didn't just change technology, they changed humanity's entire trajectory. After her death, her students continue her mission. The shift from mechanical computing to electrical computing happens decades earlier than in our timeline, because the groundwork is already there. By the 1930s and 40s, early electronic computers emerge, faster and more powerful but still following the core principles Ada wrote about nearly a century earlier. Artificial intelligence research begins in the 1940s instead of the 1950s. By the time the actual 1950s arrive, this world is already exploring advanced automation, early robotics, and conceptual neural systems. As the century progresses, everyday Americans experience technology in ways we can only imagine. By the 1970s, home computers appear, not as surprising new gadgets, but as expected household tools born from a culture that has lived with computing for more than 100 years. And by the early 2000s, society enters a mature, deeply interconnected digital age, one built on the dreams Ada Lovelace first imagined. If Ada's early computer ideas had been developed in her lifetime, the world today would be faster, smarter, and shaped by generations of innovation that began not with Silicon Valley, but with a visionary woman who saw beyond numbers. And if you enjoyed stepping into this alternate world, make sure you subscribe, because more history-shifting stories are on the way.